Hello guys, this is our class number 2 for this week. And when I designed the syllabus, I thought it was better to leave the content of the international system at the end. But recording the classes, I realized that it's better that this week is the one that starts the course instead of being the closing week. For this reason, despite the fact that in the previous video I said that is week 5, I prefer that it be week 1. So I'm going to make that clarification in a video when I'm going to talk about the the syllabus and the rules of the class and so on and so forth. So no worries. But however, uh, that that's the reason that I'm going to say that this is our class number 2 for this week. So we are going to study in this week the international monetary system. Recall that the last class we studied international trade system, and we spent in one class trying to understand what is the World Trade Organization, the story of the World Trade Organization, the evolution of the World Trade Organization, and so on and so forth. But this class, we are going to study the international monetary system. Why? Because the purpose of the international monetary system is to facilitate international economic exchange, which at the end is the other part of the coin. Because in the international trade system, we analyze how goods and services are exchanged in the international market. However, if you want to buy something or if you want to sell something in the international market, you have to use foreign currencies. So because of that, we need to understand how is the international monetary system. Why? Because most countries have national currencies that are not generally accepted as legal payment outside their borders. So because of that, the international monetary system primary function is to provide this mechanism, is to provide the possibility that you can buy foreign currencies that are that has this prerogative to buy goods and services in the international market. So we are going to explore one basic question. What do we live in a world in which currency values fluctuate substantially from week to week rather than in a world of more stable currencies? So we are going to talk about how the international monetary system is interrelated to the international trade system and how this idea of providing currency is an important decision for the international system and for the countries. So let's begin with the economics of the international monetary system. We are going to cover 3 basic concepts. That in fact, and this is the reason that that explain why I decided to move this week from week 5 to week 1 is because these concepts, even when we are going to talk with more detail in different weeks, I think that this is the best step to introduce the economic concepts that you will use in this class. So let's begin with the first concept, which is the exchange rate and exchange rate system. So the definition of an exchange rate is the price of one currency in terms of another. So that price is determined by the interaction between the supply and the demand for currencies in the foreign exchange market. But basically, if what exchange rate is a price. So if you want to travel from the United States to, I don't know, Europe, and you cannot use dollars in France, you cannot use dollars in Spain, you cannot use dollars in Germany. Why? Because those countries use euro as a currency. So if you want to buy something in those places, you have to exchange your dollars from exchange your dollars to receive euros. So this is the idea of an exchange rate. However, the price of the currencies changes due to the forces of the market. So it could be possible that today you can buy with $1, you can buy 2 euros, or it could be possible that with $1 you can buy only 1 euro, and so on and so forth. So the price depends on the market, and there are a supply which has a positive slope, and a demand which has a negative slope. So if the price is higher, so if your national currency buys more foreign currency, well, you are more willing to sell your national currency, because you are going to receive a higher reward. However, if you want to demand foreign currency, well, and the price is higher, so you prefer not to buy too many foreign currency. So depending on the supply and demand, just in the intersection, well, we can find the exchange rate of equilibrium at the market and the currency in circulation of the foreign currency. If more people want to buy than sell dollars, for example, the dollar will gain value over values or appreciate. So it's here, appreciate over value. Again, when the dollar appreciates, is because $1 could buy more foreign currency. However, conversely, if more people want to sell than buy dollars, the dollar will lose value. It could be undervalued or depreciate. So, which means that when the dollar depreciates, is because $1 could buy less foreign currency. We're going to talk about these types of models in different weeks, so no worries, but this is basically the main idea of the exchange rate. So, however, an exchange rate system is different, because an exchange rate system, it's a set of rules governing how much national currencies can appreciate and depreciate in the foreign exchange market. And there are two types of system: the fixed exchange rate and the floating exchange rate. The basic idea that differentiates both systems is because when you have or your country has a fixed exchange rate system, is because this price is not a random price. It's a price that is decided by the monetary authorities. So this is a fixed level. I'm sorry, I'm going to put this another different. It's a fixed level. So every time when the market changes the value of the exchange rate of your national currency, I don't know, and there are more demand, for instance. If there are more demand for dollars, for example, well, the price of the dollar should be appreciated. Why? Because there are more demand. So dollars are scarce, and because of that, the price of the dollar in comparison to other foreign currencies should be higher, which means in the end that the dollar could buy more foreign currencies. However, if you are in a fixed exchange rate system, well, this is not possible, because the level or the final price is in an upper level than the fixed level. So the national monetary institution should change the supply in order to expand the supply of dollars in the foreign currency market in order to reduce the price again and return the exchange rate to its fixed level. So this is the fixed exchange rate. So you cannot let your price of the currencies, which is the exchange rate, floating. And you control that. So there is not appreciation or depreciation because it's the same level. And your government has to intervene the foreign exchange market every single time to control and to control the price and to guarantee that the exchange rate is always the same. However, the other prototypical system is the floating exchange rate system, which is basically when you don't have this exchange rate fixed and you let the price floating based on the dynamics of the market. So in the previous case, there are more demand for dollars. Well, that will appreciate dollars. So the exchange rate will be higher. But in this case, the monetary institution, the national monetary institution that we're going to put it a name in later on, but in this moment, the institution that controls the monetary policy in the country doesn't have to intervene to return this price to the fixed level. So this is basically the main differences between the fixed exchange rate system and the floating exchange rate system. However, you have to keep in mind that the exchange rate system is a continuum. It is not only these two basic systems. In fact, the fixed exchange rate and the floating exchange rates are in the extremes of this continuum. So let's talk about a little bit more of the characteristics of the possible exchange rate system. So let's start with the fixed exchange rate. So the fixed exchange rate is a monetary system in which the value of the currency is fixed or pegged to the value of another currency, a basket of currencies, or a commodity like gold. The main points of a fixed exchange rate system could be, I don't know, 5. Let's see if I put different types of features. But the first feature is that there is unstable exchange rates. Why? Because in a fixed exchange rate system, the exchange rate between two currencies remains relatively stable and does not fluctuate freely in response to market forces. The monetary authority of a country actively intervenes in the foreign exchange market to maintain the fixed rate, as I already explained that with them in the previous slide. The second characteristic is that there is an official exchange rate. So, and what is that? It's a specific exchange rate that is established by the authorities, and it serves as the official rate at which the domestic currency can be exchanged for foreign currencies. This rate is typically set at a level considered favorable for economic stability and international trade. And there is, of course, a monetary government intervention, which is in the majority of the countries, is the central bank, the institution that is responsible to do that. Here in the United States, there is not an idea of a central bank, but there is something that is called Federal Reserve, and each state has its own Federal Reserve, which acts very similar to a central bank. So the central bank plays a crucial role in maintaining the fixed exchange rate. It buys or sells foreign currencies in the foreign exchange market to balance the supply and demand and keep the exchange rate within the desired range. Of course, there should be a monetary policy coordination. Under a fixed exchange rate system, the monetary policy of a country is closely linked to the exchange rate objective. Monetary authorities adjust interest rate, money supply, and other policy tools to support the fixed exchange rate and maintain currency stability. One of the most important features here is that there are trade and capital controls, because to support the fixed exchange rate, countries may implement trade and capital controls, and these measures aim to regulate cross-border transactions, limit capital flows, and prevent excessive speculation that could disrupt the fixed exchange rate system. However, there is another type of a fixed exchange rate system that is a little bit more relaxed. And this is the fixed but adjustable exchange rate system. It has, of course, a fixed rate. In a fixed but adjustable exchange rate system, the value of a country's currency is pegged to another currency or a fixed value such as a gold, and the exchange rate remains relatively stable, and it is not allowed to fluctuate freely based on market forces. Of course, the central bank should intervene, and despite that, the fixed exchange rate, the central bank or monetary authorities retain the ability to adjust the exchange rate when necessary, and then can intervene in the foreign exchange market by buying or selling their own currency to maintain the desired exchange rate level. However, the main difference is the adjustable peg. Why? Because the exchange rate is periodically adjusted in response to changing economic conditions. So if the fixed rate becomes unsustainable with the economic fundamentals of your country, the central bank may decide to reevaluate or to change this fixed level, and because of that, the central bank has the prerogative to revalue or devalue the currency to restore stability or enhance competitiveness of your country. And of course, there should be a monetary policy control coordination, because the central bank coordinates its monetary policy decision with the exchange rate objective. So interest rates, money supplies, and other policies tools are utilized to support the fixed exchange rate and maintain macroeconomic stabilities. So basically, it's kind of the same, but with the possibility of the monetary authority institution to change the level, to change the pact, to change the fixed level in order to adjust that fixed level to follow or based on the economic structure and the economic conditions of your country. The first system is more flexible, and the third system is the managed float system, in which the currency value is determined by market forces, but is subject to occasional intervention by the central bank. So first, the first characteristic here is the market, the exchange rate is market determined. So under a managed flow system, the exchange rate is primarily determined by supply and demand in the foreign exchange market. It is influenced by various factors such as trade flows, capital flows, investor sentiment, and economic fundamentals. In a managed flow system, the central bank and monetary authorities occasionally intervene in the foreign exchange market to influence the exchange rate. They may buy or sell their own currency to stabilize or manage the currency's value in response to excessive volatility, speculative attacks, or to achieve specific policy objectives. So even when there is not a rule to for the central bank to intervene, they could do it. And of course, the central bank intervention in a managed flow system are aimed at achieving specific policy objectives. These objectives may include promoting price stability, supporting economic growth, maintaining competitiveness in international trade, or even addressing excessive currency appreciation or depreciation. And one of the most important features in this system is because there is something that is called range of flexibility. So the managed flow system allows for certain degree of flexibility in the exchange rate. The central bank may establish a target or desired range within which the exchange rate should fluctuate. Intervention are typically employed when the exchange rate deviates significantly from this target range. So recall this. In a fixed exchange rate, this level is unique. So let's put it like this. So if there is a shock in the market, the central bank has to intervene in order to return the exchange rate to its fixed level. However, in the managed flow system, there is not a unique price. It is more like a band. So if the fluctuation of the market changes the exchange rate, the exchange rate in equilibrium is within the bands, well, the monetary authority doesn't have incentive to intervene. So the monetary authorities let the exchange rate fluctuate within the band. However, if the final exchange rate is outside of the band, the monetary authorities decides to intervene. So that's why there is a limited intervention here. While intervention occurs in a managed flow system, they are generally less frequent and less pronounced compared to a fixed exchange rate regime. The aim is to allow market forces to have greater influence on the exchange rate while still providing some degree of stability and control. And the fourth system, which is the extreme system, is the floating exchange rate system, which is a type of exchange rate regime in which the value of the currency is determined by market forces without any significant intervention from the central bank or monetary authorities. So the first characteristic is that the market determines exchange rate. In a floating exchange system, the exchange rate is primarily determined by the supply and demand for the currency in the foreign exchange market. The currency's value fluctuates freely based on various economic factors, and there is no interventions. So that's why there is an absence of central bank interventions. Unlike other exchange rate systems, such as the other two ones, there is a minimal or no intervention from central bank or monetary authorities in a floating exchange rate system. The exchange rate is determined solely by the market forces. And that's why the exchange rate reflects the relative strength or weakness of the domestic currency. In this system, the exchange rate allows for greater flexibility and adjustment to changing economic conditions. So that's why the exchange rate can respond to shocks and imbalances, helping to absorb external economic disturbances, and it allows the currency to find its equilibrium value based on the market condition and economic fundamentals. Of course, in the foreign exchange rates are subject to fluctuations and can experience volatility in response to various factors such as economic news, geopolitical events, and market sentiment. And the degree of exchange rate volatility can vary depending on market condition, economic stability, and investor confidence in a country. And this is the first two concepts that we are going to need for this class. The second concept is the balance of payment. So the balance of payment is a comprehensive record of all economic transactions between residents of one country and another nation over a specific period. The balance of payment consists of three main components: the current account, the capital account, and the financial account. So let's explore each of them in more detail. Firstly, we have the current account, which measures the flows of goods, services, income, and unilateral transfer between countries. It includes the balance of trade, representing the difference between a country's export and imports of goods. A positive trade balance or a surplus occurs when export exceeds imports, while a negative trade balance or deficit occurs when imports exceed exports. The current account also includes the balance of services, which reflects the earnings from exports of services and the expenditures on imports of services. Additionally, it encompasses the income balance, which includes income earned by residents from their investment abroad and the income earned by foreigners from their investment in the country. Lastly, the current account covers unilateral transfers such as the remittances from foreign workers, foreign aid, and gifts. The second component is the capital account, which records capital transfer and the acquisition or disposal of non-financial assets. It includes transactions related to the purchase or sale of fixed assets, transfer of ownership rights, and debt forgiveness. Lastly, we have the financial account, which captures international capital flows and changes in ownership of financial assets. This account includes direct investment, portfolio investment, and other forms of investment, as well as reserve assets held by the central bank. It is important to note that the balance of payments follows the principle of double entry bookkeeping. Every transaction has an equal and opposite entry, ensuring that the sum of the current account, capital account, and the financial account theoretically balances to zero. Therefore, any surplus or deficit in one account is offset by the corresponding surplus or deficit in another account. Furthermore, the current and capital accounts must be mirror images of each other. If a country has a current account deficit, it must have a capital account surplus. Conversely, if a country has a current account surplus, it must have a capital account deficit. The balance of payment serves as a vital tool for policymakers and economists to assess a country's economic performance, financial health, and interaction with the global economy. It provides valuable insights into a nation's trade competitiveness, its ability to attract investment, and its overall external economic position. By analyzing the balance of payment, policymakers can make informed decisions about trade policies, exchange rate management, and capital flow regulations. Economists can utilize this data to evaluate the sustainability of a country's economic policies and identify potential vulnerabilities in external position. In fact, you have to keep in mind, again, three basic ideas that are already set. The first one is the balance of payment is a double entry bookkeeping, which is basically that every transaction in one account has an equal and opposite entry in the other account. So here in the current account, as you can see, it's more related to the movement of goods and services. But in the financial account, is the movement of money. So if you are exporting more than you are importing, you are receiving more money. So at the end, in the financial account, this idea is that there is a positive surplus in the trading goods, but there should be a deficit in the financial assets, because at the end, there are money that is flowing from your country to another countries to finance their imports. This is basically this idea. If you have money here, because although this is something that we are going to study more and better in a different week for this class, basically the idea is that if you have a surplus in the current account, it's because you are exporting more than you are importing. So you are receiving more money. And at the end, if you have money, well, it's better for you to lend that money to the countries that are consuming more than they are earning. So that's why your financial account should be negative, reflecting that you are lending that money. So that's why the current and capital accounts must be mirror images of each other. And there is here an example. So you can pause the video and try to find the current account and the financial account, and let's see if this is on balance. So here are the possible answers. In this economy, there is a deficit in the current account. This country is importing more than that is exporting. So that's why, which means that this country is consuming more than the than this country is earning. So this country is spending more than its income. So that's why this country needs a credit to support the more consumption. That's why the financial account is positive. Okay. However, we have other concept that we need to cover in this class, which is the dynamics of balance of payment adjustment. So there is a fact. Even though the current and capital accounts must balance each other, as already presented to you, there is no assurance that the millions of international transactions that individual businesses and governments conduct every year will necessarily produce this balance. In fact, as you can see here, there is something that is very tricky, which is this part, which is something that in the central banks they name statistical discrepancy. So the statistical discrepancy is something like the error term, and they try to use the error term in order to balance the balance of payment. Why? Because they know that it is very difficult to balance the current and capital accounts. So when an imbalance arises, the country must bring its payments back into balance. And the process by which a country does so is called balance of payment adjustment. So however, this adjustment depending on if the country has a fixed or a floating exchange rate system. So in order to explain that, I'm going to make an example. So imagine that there is only two countries in this world. There are not more than two countries. There is only two countries, USA and Japan. And we're going, let's start with a fixed exchange rate system. So we have a fixed exchange rate according with the system, which is basically $1 could buy 10 yen, 100 yen. So, and I'm going to provide you the two main transactions in this world. The United States has purchased 800 billion yen worth of goods, services, and financial assets from Japan. And Japan has purchased $4 billion of items from the United States. So let's begin with the current account, and let's begin with the to build the current account. So we have different things in order to build the current account. Remember that the current account, it's only the or is covering the transaction in goods and services. So given that we are talking about goods and services here, well, we can translate these two economic transactions made by United States and Japan in the current account of the United States and Japan. So let's begin. So first we have the imports. Why? Because United States has purchased goods and services from Japan. So those goods and services has been produced in Japan. So there are imports that the United States has made from Japan. So, and they have a value of 800 million of yen. In the other world, in the other part of the transaction, Japan has purchased 4 billion of goods and services from the United States. So these 4 billion are the imports of Japan. However, remember that the current account is measured in your domestic currency. So we have to translate the imports made by United States from yen to dollars, and we have to translate the 4 billion of dollars made by Japan to yen. So we use the fixed exchange rate. So remember, $1 is equal to 100 yen. So if we make the translation, well, this 800 billion of yen, in fact, there are 8 billion of US dollar, and these 4 billion of US dollar are 400 billion of yen. So again, we have right now the imports in the domestic currency of each country. However, we need the exports in order to create the current account. But again, if Japan is importing 4 billion from the United States, that means that the United States is exporting 4 billion of goods and services to Japan. So these 4 billion are the exports of the United States. And these 800 billion of yen are the exports of Japan. So we have in this moment imports in dollars, export in dollars. So the current account of the United States is a deficit of 4 billion of dollars. And in Japan, we have 400 billion of yen of imports and 800 billion of yen of exports. So the current account for Japan is a surplus, sorry, of 400 billion of yen. So we have a deficit in the United States and a surplus of in Japan of $4 billion of dollars. So this is the current account. But what is going to happen if we are in a fixed exchange rate level? How is the adjustment of the balance of payment? Because in this moment there is not a balance between the currency, the currency account and the financial account. So let's begin. So so remember, we are in a fixed exchange rate, so this is going to be fixed, and we have the dollar market and the yen market, and we're going to be in equilibrium. So let's begin with the equilibrium with the I don't know, this is United States, so this is going to be in, let's put it like this, in purple, and this is Japan. Yeah, let's put it in purple also. So we are here. The thing is that American resident needs 800 billion of yen to pay their imports. Remember, the monetary authorities in the United States only control dollars. They cannot print yen. Again, and at the same, the monetary authorities in Japan do not control dollars. They control yen. And they need to buy dollars in order to buy products from the United States. And the United States has to buy yen in order to buy products or goods and services from Japan. So that's why the supply here in the and let's begin with the United States. So the supply in the dollar market shifted to the right in an amount of $8 billion dollars, because remember, $8 billion dollars represent 800 billion yen. So in order to get this 800 billion yen, they're going to sell 8 billion of dollars. If this is the case in the dollar market, well, the exchange rate will depreciate. Why? Because there are more dollars in the market, and given that there are more dollars in the market and the demand and the supply increases, well, the dollars are not scarce and scarce, sorry. And because of that, its relative price in comparison to the yen reduces. So $1 right now buys less yen. In the other part of the market, which is the yen market, well, the demand increases. In how much? Well, in 800 billion of yen, which is basically the same transaction. There are increment of the supply of dollars in the dollar market, which is basically an increment of the demand for yen in the same amount. And because the demand of yen is increasing, well, the exchange rate is appreciating, which is basically says that given that they are more demanding for yen, well, the price of yen should be higher, so the exchange rate of in the yen market should be appreciated. But this is the part of the American side. But remember, Japan is also demanding dollars to buy imports from United States. So Japanese residents need only 4 billion to pay for their imports from the United States. So they need acquire the 4 billion of dollars by selling 400 billion of yen. So we are in equilibrium here. So let's put this in purple to differentiate for initial analysis. Let's differentiate the movements of the United States, and let's put that this is in blue. So with a thicker line. So this is the movements in the Japanese government. So they increase their supply for 400 billion of yen. And because of that, we are in a new demand, which is the demand, the second demand responded by the movement of the United States government. So because the Japanese government is increasing the money supply of yen in the yen market, well, the price of the yen should be lower. So there is a depreciation here from E2 to E3. And with this 400 billion that they are putting in the market, they want to buy 4 billion of dollars. So the demand in the dollar market increases. And because there is more demanding dollars in the dollar market, well, the price of the dollar should increase. So there is an appreciation here from E2 to E3. And this is the final result. So we have a starting point of $1 equals to 100 yen, but then after the current account movements, well, in the dollar market, there is an depreciation of the dollar, and in the yen market, there is a appreciation of the yen. So what do both countries have to do to keep the exchange rate fixed? Because if we are in a fixed exchange rate, well, the fixed level is $1 equals to 100 yen. So depending on your position after the movements of the market, well, your monetary authority has to do different things. So if we are in the United States, and if you want to, and we are facing a depreciation of our money, well, the monetary authority, which is the Federal Reserve, has to reduce the supply of the dollars in the market. Why? Because if they reduce the supply in $4 billion, well, the dollars should be scarce, and because of that, its price should be higher. And in the Japanese market, well, the authorities, the Japanese central bank, has to increase the supply of yen in 4 billion yen in order to reduce the scarcity of dollars and reduce the price of the dollar. And this is the way how that we can explain the interventions of the monetary authorities in the foreign currency markets, depending on the exchange rate system. But the problem here, as you can see, is that this intervention affects the inflation in each country. Why? Well, because at the end, in the United States, for instance, they had to reduce the money supply. So if they have to reduce the circulation of dollars in the in the economy, well, people will have less money in their pockets, so they cannot buy goods and services. And because they cannot buy goods and services, there is a reduction in the demand in their country. And if there's a reduction in the in the American market, well, American goods become relatively less expensive than Japanese goods. Well, why? Because if there is a reduction of the demand in the American market, well, the prices will be reduced. And because of that, because the price of the products in the American market are lower, well, American citizens will change their decisions in the international market. So American imports will fall and American export will rise. Why? Because in comparison to Japan, there is an different story. So the Japanese central bank has to expand the yen supply. And because of that, the expansion of the money supply in Japan causes the Japanese prices to rise. Why? Because they are injecting liquidity in the Japanese economy. So people have more money into their pockets. So they are willing to buy more and more. So the demand in Japan will increase. And because of that, the prices of the goods and products in Japan will rise. And American goods will become relatively less expensive than Japanese goods. And because of that, Japanese exports will fall and Japanese imports will, sorry, Japanese exports will fall and Japanese imports will rise. So basically, the changes in the supply of currencies will change the prices. So in the United States, the prices will be lower, and in the Japanese market, the prices will be higher. So for Americans, they are not, they in this moment do not have incentive to buy things from Japan. Why? Well, because the prices in America are lower. So that's why their imports fall and their exports rise. Why their export rise? Because in Japan it's happening the contrary. For Japanese, American products are cheaper, so they will import more from Japan. And because their prices are higher, well, they are not selling these products into the American market because Americans prefer to buy American products, even the price. So that's why there is an adjustment in the balance of payment in a fixed exchange rate. But what happens if we had the floating exchange rate system instead of a fixed exchange rate system? Well, in a floating exchange rate system, remember the balance of payments adjustment occurs through the exchange rate movements. So both countries do not have to intervene in the market to return the exchange rate to its fixed level. So if this is the case, well, we have the final equation here, the final equilibrium in which the Americans will face a depreciated exchange rate and Japanese will face a fixed, sorry, appreciated exchange rate. And that's it. And there is not a necessity to intervene. And because of the differences of exchange rate, well, the imports of Japan will rise, and the exports of Japan will fall. And because of the depreciation in the exchange rate in the American market, well, for American citizens, imports will be more expensive, so imports will fall. And because of the depreciation in the exchange rate, the prices, the American prices related to into yen prices will be cheaper, so their exports in the American market will rise. So here there is a summary of effects. So contrasting the balance of payment adjustment process under fixed and floating exchange rates highlights the trade-off of governments face between exchange rate stability and domestic price stability. So governments can have an stable fixed exchange rate, or they can stabilize domestic prices, but they cannot achieve both goals simultaneously. What does that mean? That means this. Here, in the stabilization process of the exchange rate, the consequence is an increment of inflation in Japan and a reduction of inflation in United States. But this is a consequence that they cannot control, because their main objective is control and to stabilize the exchange rate. However, if we are in a floating exchange rate system, well, given that we are not thinking about the fixed exchange rate, we are not constrained by that. Well, we let the exchange rate floats, because we are more concerned about the controlling the prices. So we don't want to increase the inflation or create deflation in our economy because of the volatility of the foreign exchange market. So in the fixed exchange rate system, the exchange rate remains stable. However, the that will alter the money supply of the country, and that will alter the stability of the domestic prices. But in the floating exchange rate system, internal prices remain stable, while the change in relative prices is brought about through exchange rate movements. Okay, guys. So after that, we have to talk about the monetary international system, because as you recall, in the last class, we covered the trade international system. So, and we focused the trade international system in the World Trade Organization. So the monetary international trade system will, to explain the monetary international trade system, we're going to focus on the Bretton Woods system. So I want to discuss the importance and necessity of the Bretton Woods system, a monumental milestone in the history of the international monetary system. The Bretton Woods system not only marked at first, but also at last in the evolution of global financial cooperation. There are two crucial factors that make the Bretton Woods system significant. Firstly, it represented the first time in history that governments explicitly came together to make exchange rates a matter of international cooperation. Prior to Bretton Woods, the international monetary system lacked a formal framework for coordination and cooperation among nations regarding exchange rates. The Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 brought together representatives from 44 countries who recognized the need for a more structured approach to exchange rate stability. They aimed to establish a system that would foster economic growth, promote stability, and avoid the devastating economic turmoil experienced during the interwar period. The establishment of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank were key outcomes of the Bretton Woods Conference. The IMF was created to promote international monetary cooperation and provide a forum for members countries to address exchange rate issues. It aimed to maintain a stable exchange rate and facilitate the expansion of international trade and economic development. The second factor highlighting the importance of the Bretton Woods system is that it represented the final effort, at least to date, to base the international monetary system on some form of fixed exchange rates. The system aimed to achieve stability by pegging currencies to the US dollar, which was in turn tied to gold. The fixed exchange rate arrangement provided a predictability and relatively stable environment for international trade and investment. Under the Bretton Woods system, participating countries agreed to intervene in the foreign exchange markets to maintain their exchange rate within agreed upon margins. In case of imbalances, countries were expected to adjust their economic policies to restore equilibrium. This commitment to fixed exchange rates aimed to reduce uncertainties, foster confidence, and facilitate international economic cooperation. The Bretton Woods brought numerous benefits to the global economy. It provided a foundation for a post-war reconstruction and economic growth, contributing to the remarkable prosperity experience in the decades that followed. The system promoted stability in international financial markets, making it easier for businesses to plan and invest across borders. Moreover, the Bretton Woods system facilitated the expansion of global trade by providing a predictable framework for currency exchange. It reduced the risk associated with volatility of exchange rates, enabling businesses to engage in long-term trade agreements and investments. And this stability and predictability bolstered economic integration and facilitated the growth of international supply chains. However, it is important to acknowledge that the Bretton Woods system faced challenge and eventually came to an end. As a global economic condition evolved, the fixed exchange rate arrangement became increasingly difficult to sustain. Economic imbalances and structural changes in the international economic created pressure that strained the system's ability to maintain stable exchange rates. In fact, as you will read in the chapter, in the early 1970s, the pressure led to the collapse of the Bretton Woods system and the transition to a flexible exchange rate regime. While the system may not have endured, its legacy and the lessons learned continue to shape international monetary discussion and policy frameworks. So let's begin with the reasons to create of the or the creation of the Bretton Woods system. So the creation of the Bretton Woods system, which took place in 1944, aimed to establish a stable international monetary framework after the devastation of the World War II. And here are the main points of its creation. I extracted for me the main points from the chapter. However, you have to read the chapter to understand better the historical evolution of the creation of the Bretton Woods. So first feature here that I want to present is the conference at Bretton Woods. It had representatives from 44 countries that met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in July of 1944. And this meeting was planned to design a new global monetary system. The conference was organized by the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. The second main feature in the creation of the Bretton Woods is the establishment of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF. The conference led to the establishment of the IMF, an international organization tasked with promoting global monetary cooperation and stability. The IMF was designed to provide financial assistance to member countries facing balance of adjustment of payment difficulties and to oversee the international monetary system. This is so important because this is the first time when the international system created a monetary authority that could control and guide the monetary policies for the countries around the world. Aligned to that, the Bretton Woods system introduced a system of fixed exchange rates, and currencies were pegged to the dollar, and the US dollar was pegged to the gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. The fixed exchange rate system aimed to promote the stability and prevent competitive currency devaluations. And this is so important because we are going to cover that in a different week, in which we're going to compare the Bretton Woods system with the gold standard. So let's keep that in mind. In the creation of the Bretton Woods system, well, the US dollar become the key currency. Why? Because the US dollar play a central role in the Bretton Woods system. It was designed as the key currency for international transaction, and other currencies were pegged to it. The US dollar's convertibility to gold provided confidence in the system. Aligned to that, the Bretton Woods system allowed countries to impose capital controls to regulate cross-border capital flows. At the same time, the system encouraged trade liberalization to promote economic growth and international cooperation. Alongside the IMF, the conference led to the creation of the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, now known as the World Bank. The World Bank aimed to provide financial assistance to post-war reconstruction and development projects. And this is very important because this is one of the most important innovations in the financial world, because before the World Bank, the majority of the countries had to get loans from commercial banks. But right now, they could get loans from the World Bank and the IMF, which are two different types of banks that we're going to explain a little bit more in a different week. And lastly, the primary objective of the Bretton Woods system was to foster long-term economic stability and prevent another global economic crisis. By maintaining fixed exchange rates, managing capital flows, and promoting international cooperation, the system aimed to facilitate economic growth and avoid disruptive currency fluctuations. Now let's talk about the implementing Bretton Woods. So implementing the Bretton Woods system involved several key steps and transitions, including the shifts from a dollar shortage to a dollar glut. And here are the main points in the implementation process. Following World War II, many countries were in need of financial assistance for post-war reconstruction. The Bretton Woods system aimed to provide stability and financial support to facilitate economic recovery. Because of that, the US emerged as the dominant economic and military power after the war. So the Bretton Woods system established the US dollar as the key currency, and other currencies pegged their currencies to the dollar. This gave the US a central role in the international monetary system. Under the Bretton Woods system, participating countries agreed to maintain fixed exchange rates by intervening in foreign exchange markets. Central banks would buy or sell their currencies to stabilize exchange rates within a narrow band around the fixed rate. The currencies were expected to be freely convertible for current account transaction, meaning they could be exchanged for other currencies for trade and payments purposes. However, capital accounts convertibility was subject to restriction to prevent speculative capital flows. The implementation of the Bretton Woods system coincided with the launch of the Marshall Plan. The United States provided significant financial aid to war-torn European countries, creating a dollar shortage as European economies needed dollars for reconstruction. And due to the dollar shortage, countries started accumulating dollar reserves to support their currencies and facilitate international trade. The US became a creditor nation and its currency was in high demand, reinforcing the dominance of the dollar. The Bretton Woods system, coupled with the post-war economic recovery, led to a surge in a global trade and economic growth. Countries benefit from a stable exchange rate and increased international cooperation, fueling economic expansion. And as a consequence, there was a transition to a dollar glut. Why? Because as the global economy grew and the US continued running trade deficits, there was an excess supply of dollars in the international financial system. And the accumulation of dollar reserves by foreign countries led to a transition from a dollar shortage to a dollar glut. However, the Bretton Woods system collapsed. And these are the most important features of this for the end of the Bretton Woods. For me, however, you have to read the chapter and understand the evolution. So the Bretton Woods system collapsed primarily due to a combination of economic and political factors. The first one, there was an imbalances and overvaluation. Under the Bretton Woods system, the US dollar was pegged to gold and other major currencies were pegged to the US dollar. However, over time, the US experienced persistent balance of payment deficits, resulting in an oversupply of dollar in global markets. This led to concerns about the overvaluation of the US dollar and the sustainability of the fixed exchange rate system. There was a lot of speculative pressures. As doubts grew, as doubts grew about the value of the US dollar, speculators began to engage in currency speculation, particularly against the dollar. They took advantage of the fixed exchange rates to buy undervalued currency and sell overvalued ones, creating pressure on the system. And there is a huge relationship between the dollar devaluation and the Nixon policies. Why? Because to address the growing imbalances and pressure of the US dollar, the US government decided to devalue the dollar in 1971, which meant reducing the official gold backing of the dollar. This action, known as the Nixon shock, signaled the end of the Bretton Woods system and the breakdown of the fixed exchange rate regime. The Bretton Woods system lacked a mechanism for countries to adjust their exchange rates in response to economic imbalances. This rigidity made it difficult for countries to correct trade deficits or surpluses through exchange rate adjustments, leading to persistent imbalances and a strain on the system. The post-World War II era witnesses a significant economic challenges and increased globalization. These changes, including the emergency economic changes and increased globalization. These changes also includes the emergence of new economic powers and the growth of international trade. It strained the Bretton Woods system, which was designed for a different era and did not adequately address the changes dynamics of the global economy. And of course, we have to talk about the political pressure and conflict interest. Why? Because the Bretton Woods system relied on cooperation and consensus among other member countries. However, as economic interests diverged and geopolitical tension increased, it became increasingly challenging to reach agreements and maintain cooperation. That because of that, conflicting national interests and political dynamics contributed to the breakdown of the system. And even even though at the beginning of the Bretton Woods, there was the creation of the International Monetary Fund, well, there was a lack of sufficient resources to the IMF. Why? Because the IMF establishes as a part of the Bretton Woods system, uh, 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 and thought to provide this financial assistance to the countries. The resources of the IMF were limited and insufficient to address the magnitude of challenges faced by some countries, undermining confidence in the system. So these factors, among others, led to the collapse of the Bretton Woods system and the transition to a more flexible exchange rate regime. And because of that, the world decided to implement a floating exchange system instead of a fixed one. The collapse of Bretton Woods marked a significant turning point in the global monetary system and had a far-reaching implication for international trade and finance that we are going to cover in this course in the following weeks. So this is the end of this class, and see you in the next class. Bye.